The Etherians were old. Not old like mountains or rivers or even planets. They were old like the universe itself. They had existed since the first stars had begun to burn in the endless darkness. They had watched those stars die and new ones take their place. They had seen galaxies spin into beautiful spirals and collapse into nothing. Time meant little to them because they had so much of it. They were immortal. They could not die from age or sickness. Their bodies were not made of flesh and bone like lesser creatures. They were woven from the very fabric of space itself, from dark matter and energy that most beings could not even see. When they moved through the cosmos, reality bent around them like water around a stone. For billions of years, the Etherians had done whatever they pleased. They had created worlds for fun. They had seeded planets with life, just to watch what would happen. The way a bored child might build sandcastles, only to knock them down. They had fought wars with other ancient beings, wars that had lasted longer than most species existed. They had won those wars. They always won. The cosmic lattice was the only thing the Etherians respected. It was not a being exactly. It was more like the nervous system of the universe, an ancient intelligence that had existed even before the Etherians themselves. It watched everything. It remembered everything. And sometimes it gave warnings. When the lattice had warned against disturbing the void leviathans, massive creatures that slept between galaxies, the Etherians had listened. Those creatures were dangerous, even to immortals. When the lattice had warned against harvesting dying stars too quickly, the Etherians had slowed down. They understood that some things could hurt them. But one day, a new warning pulsed through the lattice. It rippled across dimensions and whispered into the minds of every Etherian in existence. The message was simple. Do not agitate the mortals of the third arm. Do not disturb the ones who call themselves human. High Sovereign Velithrix received this warning in her palace, a structure that existed in 17 dimensions at once. She was the oldest of all Etherians, the first of their kind to gain true consciousness. She had ruled for longer than most galaxies had existed. Her form shifted constantly, sometimes appearing as a woman made of starlight, sometimes as a geometric shape that hurt lesser minds to look upon. She read the warning 3 times. Then she laughed. The sound of her laughter echoed across her palace and into the void beyond. Other Etherians heard it and came to see what had amused their sovereign so greatly. "Look at this," Velithrix said, projecting the warning for all to see. "The lattice warns us about mortals, about creatures that live for perhaps a century before their bodies fail and they become dust." Her advisors gathered around her. Some of them were merely millions of years old, practically children by Etherian standards. Others were nearly as ancient as Velithrix herself. All of them shared her amusement. "I have seen these humans," said one advisor, a being called Karathin, who had spent time observing the younger species of the galaxy. "They are soft. They are small. They live on a single planet orbiting a very ordinary star. They have only recently learned to travel between worlds, and even then, they can barely reach their nearest neighbors. What could such creatures possibly do to us?" asked another. Velithrix waved her hand, and an image appeared before them. It showed Earth, a small blue and green world covered mostly in water. It showed the humans who lived there, going about their short lives, building things, fighting each other, loving each other, dying. "They are amusing," Velithrix declared. "Nothing more. The lattice has grown old and confused. It sees threats where there are none. These humans are like insects. Interesting to watch, perhaps, but certainly not dangerous." She dismissed the warning from her mind. In all her billions of years, the lattice had never been wrong. But there was a first time for everything, she supposed. And what possible threat could mortal creatures pose to beings who had existed since the dawn of creation? I think, Velithrix said slowly, a cruel smile forming on her face of starlight, that we should take a closer look at these humans. It has been so long since we added new specimens to the menagerie. The old ones have become boring. The menagerie was the Etherians' greatest collection. It existed in a pocket dimension, a bubble of space they had created specifically to hold interesting creatures from across the universe. Over the eons, they had collected thousands of species. Some had come willingly, grateful for the chance to live forever in comfort. Others had fought and eventually been broken. All of them now existed as curiosities, things for the immortals to observe and study and occasionally play with. The humans do seem fascinating, Corathan agreed. So emotional, so dramatic. They feel everything so intensely because they know their time is short. Then, it is decided, Velithrix announced. We will collect some of them. We will see what makes them so special that the lattice would waste a warning on them. As her advisors bowed and departed to make preparations, Velithrix turned back to the image of Earth. She watched the humans scurrying about their lives, building their little cities, dreaming their little dreams. They had no idea what was coming for them. They had no idea that ancient eyes had turned in their direction, far away. In the depths of reality, the cosmic lattice pulsed once more. Its warning went unheeded. It had done what it could. It had spoken the truth. The Etherians had chosen not to listen. The lattice was patient. It had seen civilizations rise and fall. It had watched the arrogant become humble and the mighty become dust. It did not know exactly what would happen when the immortals touched the mortals. But it knew one thing with absolute certainty. The Etherians would learn why the warning existed. They would learn it the hard way, and the universe would remember. The Etherian vessel appeared above Earth without warning. One moment the sky was clear. The next moment, something impossible hung among the clouds. The ship was not made of metal or glass or anything humans could understand. It looked like space itself had been folded and twisted into a shape that hurt the eyes. It changed constantly, angles shifting, surfaces rippling like water. It was beautiful in the way that a hurricane was beautiful, or a forest fire, or any force of nature that could destroy everything in its path. The year was 2247. Humanity had grown much since their early days on Earth. They had built cities on Mars. They had placed stations in orbit around the moons of Jupiter. They had sent explorers to distant corners of the solar system. They thought they understood the universe. They were wrong. The ship positioned itself over New Geneva, one of the largest cities on Earth. Millions of people looked up at it. Some ran, some prayed. Some simply stood and stared, unable to process what they were seeing. There was no communication, no demands, no warnings. The ship simply took. A beam of light, if it could be called light, descended from the vessel. It touched the city, and 12,000 people vanished. One moment they were there. The next moment they were gone. Not dead, just gone. Transported somewhere else, somewhere far beyond the reach of human technology. Then the ship left. It folded itself into nothing and disappeared, leaving behind only confusion and terror and grief. Colonel Yara Okonkwo was one of the 12,000 taken. She woke in a place that made no sense. The sky above her was purple and green in colors she had no names for. The ground beneath her feet felt solid but looked like glass. Strange plants grew in the distance, shapes that seemed wrong, that made her brain itch when she looked at them too long. All around her, other humans were waking up. Some were crying. Some were screaming. Some sat in silent shock, unable to accept what had happened. Yara got to her feet. She was 43 years old. She had spent 20 years in the military. She had fought in 3 wars and survived all of them. She had been trained to stay calm in impossible situations. This was the most impossible situation she had ever faced. She looked around and saw other creatures nearby. Not humans. Something else entirely. They had too many limbs, or not enough limbs, or bodies that seemed to exist in more dimensions than they should. And all of them had the same look in their eyes. Defeat. Acceptance. The look of creatures that had stopped fighting long ago. One of them approached her. It was tall and thin, with skin like blue leather and 6 eyes that blinked in sequence. "You are new," it said. Its voice was like wind through dead leaves. "You are the latest addition to the collection." "Collection?" Yara asked. "The menagerie. The Etherians collect interesting species. They watch us. They study us. Sometimes they play with us." The creature made a sound that might have been a laugh or a sob. "My people were collected 4,000 years ago. We learned to accept our place. You will too, eventually." Yara looked at the creature. She looked at the other broken beings scattered around this strange dimension. She looked at the humans who were still crying, still screaming, still lost in despair. "No," she said. The creature tilted its head. "No, we are not going to accept anything. We are not going to be pets. We are not going to give up." She raised her voice so all the humans could hear her. "Listen to me. All of you, listen. I know you are scared. I know you are confused. But we are not dead. We are alive. And as long as we are alive, we fight." Some of the humans looked at her with hope in their eyes. Others looked at her like she was insane. "They are gods," someone called out. "What can we do against gods?" Yara smiled. It was not a nice smile. Gods get comfortable. Gods get lazy. Gods forget what it feels like to be afraid. We are going to remind them. She organized the humans over the following days. She found the soldiers and the scientists and the engineers among them. She found the doctors and the teachers and the ordinary people who had skills they had never thought would matter. She put them all to work. Within a week, they had mapped the boundaries of their prison. It was large, but not infinite. It had rules, patterns, weaknesses. Within a month, they had figured out how the food dispensers worked. They had stockpiled supplies. They had started playing. The Etherians sent observation constructs to watch their new pets. These were small drones made of the same impossible material as their ships, designed to record everything the collected species did. The first construct that entered the human section of the menagerie never came back. Yara led the team that destroyed it. They used makeshift weapons, tools they had built from scraps they had gathered. The construct did not expect resistance. It did not expect violence. It certainly did not expect to be torn apart by creatures that were supposed to be helpless. When the construct fell, Yara stood over its broken remains. "Take it apart," she ordered. "Find out how it works. Find out what makes these bastards tick. And then figure out how to hurt them." Far away, in her palace of 17 dimensions, High Sovereign Vilithrix watched. The amusement had faded from her ancient face. In its place was something she had not felt in eons. It was not fear. Not yet. But it was the beginning of it. These humans were supposed to be simple. They were supposed to cry and beg and eventually accept their fate like all the others. Instead, they were fighting, and something about the look in their eyes, the absolute refusal to surrender, made Vilithrix wonder if perhaps she had made a mistake. Earth did not forget its stolen children. In the days after the abduction, grief turned to anger, and anger turned to purpose. The United Earth Council met in emergency session for the first time in 50 years. Leaders from every nation, every colony, every station in the solar system gathered to decide what to do. Some wanted to hide. They argued that humanity should stay quiet, stay small, hoped that the beings who had taken their people would not return. If gods existed in the universe, Surely the wisest course was to avoid their attention. Others wanted revenge. Chancellor Maria Santos stood before the assembly. She was 60 years old, with gray hair and tired eyes and a spine of pure steel. She had lost her daughter in the abduction. Her voice shook when she spoke, but not from weakness. "We have spent our entire history being afraid," she said. "Afraid of the dark. Afraid of each other. Afraid of the unknown. And where has that fear gotten us? 12,000 of our people, taken like animals. Our children, our parents, our friends, stolen by creatures that think we are nothing more than insects to be collected." She looked around the room. "I am done being afraid. We do not know if we can win. We do not know if we can even hurt these beings. But I know one thing with absolute certainty. We will try. We will try until our last breath. Because that is what humans do. We do not give up. We do not surrender. We fight." The vote was unanimous. Humanity declared war on gods. Dr. Emil Vasquez had spent his entire career being laughed at. He was a physicist, brilliant but strange, obsessed with theories that other scientists called impossible. He believed that dimensions could bleed into each other. He believed that space could be folded, that reality itself could be manipulated by creatures with the right knowledge. No one had taken him seriously. Until now, the Council gave him unlimited resources. They gave him the brightest minds on Earth and in the colonies. They gave him one order: find out how the Etherians did what they did, and find out how to hurt them. Vasquez worked without rest. His team analyzed every scrap of data from the abduction. They studied the readings their instruments had captured, the strange energy signatures, the impossible geometry of the Etherian vessel. Piece by piece, they began to understand. "They exist in multiple dimensions at once," Vasquez explained to the Council after 18 months of work. "That is the source of their power. They are not gods. They are simply beings that have learned to spread themselves across reality. But anything that exists can be hurt. We just need to find the right weapon." Meanwhile, in the menagerie, Colonel Yara Alconcourt and her people had not been idle. They had taken apart the observation construct piece by piece. They had studied its components, learned its secrets. The scientists among the captured humans had worked day and night, sleeping in shifts, pushing themselves to the breaking point. And they had learned something important. The Etherians were not invincible. They had weaknesses. Their consciousness vibrated at specific frequencies. Their forms spread across multiple dimensions. At points where they were thin, where they could be disrupted, they were not gods. They were just old. Yara recorded everything they learned. She etched the information in the metal plates, into stone, into anything that would survive. She did not know if anyone would ever find this knowledge, but she refused to let it die with them. 3 years after the abduction, Dr. Vasquez achieved the impossible. He tore a hole in reality itself. It was small at first, barely larger than a coin. But it was a doorway, a path from normal space into the dimension where the Etherians kept their collection. The energy required was enormous. It took 3 fusion reactors running at full capacity just to keep the portal open for a few seconds. But it was enough. A probe went through first. It returned with images, with data, with proof that the captured humans were still alive. Then a team of soldiers went through, heavily armed with experimental weapons based on Vasquez's research. They found Yara and her people. They found humans who had spent 3 years fighting, planning, refusing to break. And they brought them home. But they brought back something else too. They brought back everything the captured humans had learned. Every weakness they had discovered. Every secret they had uncovered about their captors. The Etherians had kept humans in a cage for 3 years. In that time, the humans had mapped every inch of their cage. They had studied their captors. They had found the cracks in the armor of beings that thought themselves invulnerable. Dr. Vasquez looked at the data and smiled for the first time in years. "They are not gods," he said. "They are just old. And old things get comfortable. They forget what it is like to be challenged. They forget what it is like to be afraid." High Sovereign Vilithrix learned of the escape. She learned that her menagerie had been breached, that her specimens had been taken back. She felt something cold spread through her ancient form. The cosmic lattice pulsed again. Its message was different this time. It did not warn. It simply stated a fact. You were told. You did not listen. What comes next is not our concern. For the first time in her endless existence, Vilithrix felt truly alone. The universe itself had turned its back on her. The lattice, which had guided and protected the Etherians for eons, had declared them on their own, and somewhere in the distance, she could feel the humans preparing, planning, building weapons designed specifically to hurt beings like her. They had been insects, curiosities, pets. Now, they were something else entirely. They were enemies. The Etherians struck first. They had no choice, or so they told themselves. These humans had escaped from the menagerie. They had stolen secrets. They had to be destroyed before they became a real threat. High Sovereign Vilithrix assembled a war fleet, the likes of which had not been seen in 1 billion years. Hundreds of vessels, each one a nightmare of folded space and impossible angles, each one capable of destroying worlds. She sent them toward Earth with simple orders: burn everything. Leave nothing alive. Erase this troublesome species from existence. The fleet never arrived. Humanity had spent the years after the rescue preparing for exactly this moment. They knew the Etherians would come. They knew they could not match the immortals in raw power. So they did what humans had always done when faced with stronger enemies. They cheated. The space between Earth and the outer reaches of the solar system was filled with traps. Dimensional snares that caught ethering vessels and tangled them in knots of broken space. Gravity wells hidden inside asteroid fields that pulled ships off course and into each other. Mines that did not explode, but instead released frequencies that disrupted Etherian consciousness, causing their crews to lose focus, to lose coordination, to lose themselves. And then there were the weapons that Dr. Vasquez had designed. He called them spite bombs because that was exactly what they were. Weapons born from pure human anger. The spite bombs did not destroy Etherian vessels. They did something worse. They aged them. The immortals had never experienced time the way mortals did. They had never felt the slow decay of entropy, the gradual wearing down that all mortal creatures accepted as part of existence. The spite bombs forced them to feel it. In seconds, Etherian warriors experienced centuries of aging. Their forms grew weak. Their minds grew tired. For the first time in their endless lives, they understood what it meant to be old. The war lasted 12 years by human counting. To the Etherians, who measured time in epochs and eons, it was barely a moment. But that was exactly the problem. Humans fought with urgency. Every battle mattered to them. Every death demanded to be avenged. Every victory was celebrated as if it might be the last one. They did not have forever to wait for things to get better. They had to win now, today, this moment. The Etherians did not understand this kind of fighting. They had always had time. They could wait out any enemy, outlast any conflict. 1,000 years meant nothing to beings who had existed for billions. But humans did not give them 1,000 years. Humans pressed constantly, attacking, retreating, attacking again. They gave their enemies no rest. Colonel Yara Okonkwo, now promoted to admiral, led the human forces from the front. She was 55 years old now, gray-haired and scarred, her body showing the wear of a lifetime of war. But her eyes burned with the same fire they had held in the menagerie all those years ago. They do not understand us, she told her officers before a major battle. They cannot understand us. They have never had to fight for anything. They have never had to struggle against time itself. We have been fighting since the day we were born. Fighting to survive. Fighting to grow. Fighting to matter. This is just another fight. She was right. The Etherians had not fought a real war in longer than most species had existed. They had forgotten what it felt like to lose. They had forgotten what it felt like to be afraid. The humans reminded them. Battle after battle, the immortals retreated. System after system fell to human forces. The spike bombs claimed more and more Etherian warriors, leaving them weakened, confused, experiencing for the first time the terror of mortality. High Sovereign Velithrix watched her empire crumble. She could not understand what was happening. These creatures lived for moments. Their entire civilization was younger than some of her memories. How could they be winning? She called her advisors together. "Explain this to me," she demanded. "We are eternal. We are powerful beyond their comprehension. How are we losing to insects?" One of her advisors, young Corathan, who had once observed the humans with such amusement, spoke carefully. "They fight differently than any enemy we have faced. They do not care about survival. They care about victory. They will sacrifice everything, their ships, their lives, their entire worlds, just to hurt us. They call it spite. They would rather burn than kneel." "That is madness," Velithrix said. "Perhaps," Corathan replied. "But it is effective madness. We have always assumed that our immortality made us stronger, but it has also made us careful. We do not wish to risk our eternal lives. They have no such concern. They know they will die eventually. They would rather die fighting than live surrendering." The war ground on. Human losses were terrible. Millions died. Entire colonies were destroyed. But for every human who fell, 10 more stepped forward to take their place. For every world lost, the survivors fought harder. Their anger never faded. Their determination never wavered. And slowly, inevitably, the tide turned. The Etherians began to fracture. Some wanted to continue fighting. Others wanted to flee, to find some distant corner of the universe where these terrible mortals could not reach them. For the first time in their eternal history, they experienced division, doubt, fear. Admiral Okonkwo led the final campaign herself. Human forces pushed deep into Etherian territory, taking ground that immortals had held for billions of years. They did not come to conquer. They came to prove a point. Mortals could defeat gods. Spike could overcome eternity, and the universe would never forget. The war ended not with a treaty, but with a lesson. Human forces breached the Etherian homeworld on a Tuesday. Later, historians would note the day. They would write about it in books and teach it in schools and build monuments to remember it. But for the soldiers who were there, it was just another day of fighting. Just another step toward victory. The homeworld was not a world in any normal sense. It was a dimension unto itself, a place woven from thought and starlight and the dreams of beings older than most galaxies. It existed in 17 dimensions at once. It was beautiful and terrible and impossible. Admiral Yara Okonkwo walked through its shattered gates, with human soldiers at her back. She was 67 years old now. Her hair was white. Her face was lined with scars and age. Her body ached from decades of war, but her eyes still burned. High Sovereign Velithrix waited for her in the throne room. The ancient being looked different now, diminished. Her form, which had once shifted constantly through shapes of impossible beauty, now flickered weakly. The spike bombs and the long war had taken their toll. She was still immortal. She could not die, but she had learned what it meant to be tired. The two looked at each other across the vast space of the throne room. immortal and mortal, ancient and young, the being who had started this war and the being who had ended it. You could have left us alone, Okonkwo said. Her voice was calm, cold, the voice of someone who had moved past anger into something deeper. We were happy in our little corner of the galaxy. We were not a threat. We were not even interesting. We were just living our short lives, building our small things, dreaming our little dreams. Velithrix said nothing. But you had to take, Okonkwo continued. You had to remind us how small we were. You had to prove that you were gods and we were nothing. 12,000 of our people, taken like animals, put in a cage for your amusement. You have won, Velithrix said. Her voice was tired in a way it had never been before. What more do you want? Okonkwo smiled. It was not a kind smile. I want you to understand. I want you to really, truly understand what you did wrong. Because I do not think you know. Even now, after everything, I do not think you understand. She walked closer to the throne. The human soldiers behind her kept their weapons ready, but they did not need them. The Etherians were broken. They had no fight left. The cosmic lattice warned you, Okonkwo said. The universe itself told you to leave us alone. And you laughed. You thought the warning was a mistake. You thought nothing so small and brief as a human could ever be a threat to beings like you. Velithrix's form flickered. We are eternal. You are dust. In 1,000 years, you will be gone, and we will still be here. This changes nothing. That is where you are wrong. Okonkwo's voice was sharp. You have existed for billions of years. And what have you built? What have you created? Nothing but monuments to your own boredom. You collected species like toys because you had nothing better to do. You started wars for entertainment. You treated the universe like your playground because you had forever to play. She gestured to the soldiers behind her, to the weapons they carried, to the technology that had brought immortals to their knees. We have existed for a fraction of a moment compared to you, and we changed the universe. We made immortals bleed. We made gods afraid. Not because we are stronger than you, not because we are smarter, because we do not have time to waste. She stepped even closer until she was looking directly into Velithrix's ancient eyes. That is what you will never understand. Mortals have deadlines. We cannot wait for things to get better. We cannot hope our enemies will forget us. We cannot put off until tomorrow what needs to be done today, because tomorrow we might be gone. So we act. We fight. We build. We love and hate and rage against the dying of the light. Every moment matters to us because every moment is precious. She turned to leave. Then she paused. We are not staying. We are not conquering your worlds or taking your territory. We are going home. Rebuild if you can. Live your eternal lives. But remember this. The universe gave you one rule about humans. Do not provoke them. And you broke it. She walked away. Her soldiers followed. Behind them, High Sovereign Velithrix sat alone in her throne room, surrounded by the ruins of everything she had, built over billions of years. She had called humans insects, curiosities, pets. She had been wrong. Centuries passed. The Etherians did rebuild, slowly, carefully. But they were changed. They no longer saw themselves as gods. They no longer looked upon mortal species with contempt. They had learned, finally, painfully, that existence meant nothing without purpose. The cosmic lattice updated its warnings. Where once it had cautioned against void leviathans and hungry singularities, a new entry now pulsed at the top of every list. The beings who call themselves human occupy the third arm of the Milky Way galaxy. They live briefly, love fiercely, and hold grudges that outlast stars. Under no circumstances should they be provoked. They have proven willing to sacrifice everything to prove a point. The Etherians ignored this warning, learned from their mistake. Across the galaxy, ancient civilizations read the warning and quietly adjusted their borders. They gave human territories a wide berth. They treated human diplomats with respect. They never ever forgot what had happened to the beings who had underestimated them. And humanity? They went back to their lives. They built new cities on new worlds. They explored deeper into the cosmos than ever before. They argued and loved and dreamed and died, the same as they always had. They did not need to be eternal. They did not need to live forever. They just needed to matter. And they had proven, beyond any doubt, that they did. The universe remembered. The universe would always remember. Never agitate mortals. They had warned them. They should have listened.